Heartland of America and the gateway to the West. Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie. Welcome to Coast AM. Next hour, who's behind the secret door? 3 separate guests coming in, and I have no idea who they are. We'll find out together. Here's what's happening, a story we've been following. The U.S. government has asked the scientific journals Nature and Science to censor data on a laboratory-made version of bird flu that could spread more easily to humans, fearing that it could be used as a potential weapon. The U.S. National Science Advisory Board for Biosecurity asked the 2 journals to publish revised versions of studies by 2 research groups that created forms of the H5N1 avian flu that could easily jump between ferrets, typically considered a sign that the virus could spread quickly among humans. The journals are objecting to the request, saying that it would restrict access to information that might advance the cause of public health. Gary Reidenauer attended Hiram College, attended medical school in Mexico. Let's check in with him now on this story. Gary, this could be one of our worst nightmares, couldn't it?
Well, this is absolutely unbelievable. The National Institute of Health funded the University of Wisconsin and a research center in Rotterdam to create the deadliest biological weapon in history, and then they wanted to print it and tell the world how to make it. We're handing the keys out to Armageddon.
Why are we doing this? I mean, why are they playing around with Mother Nature this way, unless they want it?
That's true. The claim is that they wanted to develop this very deadly form of bird flu so that they could study it to make a vaccine. Even if a vaccine existed, billions of people will die before the vaccine ever gets out to everybody. This is Russian roulette with a fully loaded gun.
It is. Gary, I said a couple of years ago during the H1N1 scare when they said it was going to be a pandemic, and I said, no, it's not going to happen. Don't worry. We only had a few hundred cases worldwide. But I did say this, and I qualified it by saying, but we could have one if they play around with this in the test tube and it gets out. And sure enough, it could happen.
And the problem is that we knew that there were 7 genes that needed to mutate to make this a killer, and they found out that you only needed to mutate 5 of them to do this. What's the National Institute of Health doing making biological weapons? Where's the CIA and the FBI? Where's Homeland Security in this? I mean, my God, this is dangerous.
Dangerous, Gary, probably one of the biggest stories I've heard in a long time. Thank you so much. We'll continue to follow it. A Brazilian woman who has given birth to a baby with 2 heads admitted that she initially expected twins. She gave birth by cesarean at a hospital in Brazil with her newborn weighing 9.9 pounds. And a tribute to the religious celebrations of Christmas, she has decided to call the pair Emmanuel and Jesus. Little baby, 2 heads. North Korea will shift to collective rule from a strongman dictatorship after last week's death of Kim Jong-il. Although his untested young son will be at the head of the ruling, we'll see how far this works. His uncle and the military are going to run the country with him. I give that a few months. The number of new U.S. home foreclosures jumped by more than 21% in the third quarter from the previous quarter as banks moved more aggressively after a pause that began late last year. There's registered investment advisor Mish Shedlock with us. Mish, it's still a problem, and it's getting worse, isn't it?
It is getting worse. And you know what? The story behind this story is a comment by Lawrence Yun, the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors, came out today. And I'm reading this article, and I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, how can this be true? Here's a statement. From a consumer's perspective, only the local market information matters, and there are no changes to local market listing service status or supply-demand balances or local home prices. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but the National Association of Realtors just downgraded by 15% all of their home sale predictions going back for like 4 years. So they've been just like blatantly wrong. And I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at this statement, and I'm trying to figure out how in the heck can their local home price data be right and their national home price data be wrong by 14%? So, I'm looking at this and say, can this really be true? This is what I do, though. When I don't know something, I try and call up someone that I think knows more than I do. So I called up my friend, Calculated Risk, and he said, "Mesh, this is pretty easy. Look at the major procedural errors that the National Association of Realtors has. They've got sampling errors. Not all of their local data was used to go into the national numbers. They've got size errors. The local areas changed in size, so if a local area changes in size, that, of course, affects the extrapolated results. They've got benchmark errors. They made benchmarks based off of 2000 census data. Well, we've got 10 years between census data. We have for sale by owner changes. The National Association of Realtors changed. We've had huge numbers of sales of people trying to sell homes themselves, going on and off the National Realtor.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Mitch, where are these families going who have been foreclosed? Where are they going?
We do have one uptick, and I talked with Calculated Risk today. We are seeing an uptick in multiple family housing development, but we're not seeing anything on homes, single-family homes. We have a huge supply for years and years and years ahead. I think at least a decade. Can I get one comment in, though, on dysfunctional politics that's going on in Congress right now?
All right, go ahead.
A very quick one. We have the Democrats and the Republicans both championing tax cuts. The Senate passed a bill that's going to extend tax cuts for the unemployed to next year. The House passed a measure to do it for a year. Obama wants the measure passed. So we have the House and the Senate and the President that want to pass a tax bill. The result is no tax bill.
No, they can't agree.
It's absolutely amazing. They claim to agree, but they don't. It's dysfunctional politics.
That's politics, Mish. Thank you so much. A Houston man has told authorities that he wants to clear his conscience and pay a $1 parking ticket that he received 58 years ago. Dale Crawford of Houston sent a letter to city officials after finding the ticket among some keepsakes. He says he wants to pay the debt, even though it's a small, almost unnoticeable amount. Mr. Crawford received the ticket back in 1953, the day he was inducted into the Army. He left his 1946 Nash, some of you might remember that car, at a parking meter at an induction station, but because his father was late retrieving the car, it had a ticket. The Houston mayor says she will personally accept his payment and thank him for settling an example for others who owe debts to the city. Well, a year from now, the world will come to an end, maybe, according to some who talk about the Mayan calendar. Some others, like me, believe it could be some kind of solar event. Nonetheless, Clint Arthur joins us in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. What if this was the last year of your life? And welcome back to Coast. Clint Arthur, graduate of the Wharton Business School, believes in going for it, living each day to the fullest, which is a good way to do it. His website, thelastyearofyourlife.com. His book, Free New Power, and here he is back on Coast to Coast. So we've got a year to live, Clint. Is that it?
Well, possibly today is the first day of the last year of the Mayan calendar.
And that means what for us?
That's a big question that philosophers and historians and scientists have been debating for hundreds of years. Does it mean it's the end of the world? Does it mean a new age of consciousness for human beings? We don't know. All I do know is that I'm going to be living as if this is going to be the last year of my life, and I'm going to be sharing that experience with thousands of people around the world who are committed to getting everything we can out of every day that we have left.
Well, you know, when we talked back in April, Clint, and I agree with your philosophy. I mean, why waste our life by just, putting things off, by not being happy? You got to live as if this is it, and enjoy yourself. And and make something of your life. And if it's a year or 10 years or a month, at least you lived it to its fullest, huh?
Absolutely. In 2010, the youngest member of the Last Year of Your Life experience went to bed on October 28th at the age of 33 and did not wake up. A week later, I was privileged to be able to speak at his funeral. And I tell you, it took a lot of courage for me to stand up there in a room full of strangers and talk about a man that I knew through his work in my program. And it was a growth experience for me to stand up there, and I know it was a growth experience for him to go through the last days of his life and try to get every bit of juice that he could squeeze out of the lemon.
Clint, what do you tell people who are pressured? I just had a story before you came on. Foreclosures are going through the roof. There are some people out there that just aren't making it. They're not having a great time right now. What do you say to those folks in terms of how to make this the best year of their life?
It all comes down to what you want, and it comes down to, are you willing to go for what's truly in your heart, the passion that's in your heart? And if you're not going for the passion, you're going to find yourself sleepwalking through the days of your life like a zombie. And that's not going to inspire you to get up in the morning and do your best and show up strong at work for your family and for yourself. And if you're not living with the full zest that you know you are capable of, you need to take a look inside and ask the tough questions of yourself. Where am I not pushing where I could? Where am I not expecting enough from myself? How could I get more inspiration in my life? Who am I surrounding myself, and what is their responsibility in asking me the wrong questions or pushing me in the wrong directions? Your life is what you expect your life to be, and until you're willing to change your expectations about your life, you're not going to get the fulfillment that you want. For example, last year we had a woman in the program whose name was Glenda from Kansas. And Glenda from Kansas has an alpaca farm. And she told me on the phone that every day she was running and doing and busy all day long. And she was making things happen for the alpaca goats and for her husband and for the farm. And she felt like she was not getting anything for herself. Here she was living the dream. A farmer in Kansas. I mean, it's so idyllic, and yet she had no personal fulfillment. And we looked at what she wanted for her year. Every year we write down a list of goals. And I had her go through the goals and read them to me. And she said she had wanted to create a spiritual practice for herself. And I said, what does that look like for you? And she said, well, that would be like 20 to 30 minutes of yoga every day. And I said, well, Glenda, why don't you just start every day with 20 to 30 minutes of yoga so that every day you get something for you?
That's right.
And that made all the difference in the world.
Clint, why do so many people sell themselves short?
Well, I'd like to answer that question with another question, and that is, think back to where you were on New Year's Eve of the millennium. What were you doing? Were you out having good food and good wine, hanging out with family and friends, having a fun time? Well, Clint Arthur, graduate of the world-famous Wharton Business School, same business school as Donald Trump, I was driving a taxi cab that night, and I was driving around with tons of people all over Los Angeles, and I felt totally alone. And when I got home from that night, I had made $513, which was my normal weekly take-home in those days.
Yeah.
And yet, I felt like a total loser. And I crawled into bed on my little tiny boat in Marina del Rey. And I had my heavy down comforter on and all my clothes, my heaviest clothes, because it was freezing on the boat with no heat. And I opened up my favorite book, Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. And I started to read by the light of my flashlight. And I got distracted by my breath because it was condensing in the cold night air. That's how cold it was. And I started thinking back over my life and how I got to be that loser taxi driver on New Year's Eve, how I had graduated from Stuyvesant High School, where I had studied creative writing with Frank McCourt, the author of that Pulitzer Prize-winning book, and then graduated from the same business school and saw my fraternity brothers go on to make millions of dollars as directors of Goldman Sachs Corporation on Wall Street while I was a taxi driver. And then I moved out to Los Angeles to pursue my dream of becoming a filmmaker, like my idol, Spike Lee. And after 10 years of banging my head up against the brick wall of the Hollywood dream, there I was, the taxi driver on New Year's Eve. And I started to cry that night because I was terrified that I had thrown away all the great opportunities I would ever have, and that I was never going to be able to dig my life out of the ditch I had dug for it. And I swore I was going to do everything I could to change. And I did all kinds of self-help work. I walked on fire with Tony Robbins. I did Toltec wisdom studies. I did men's power circles. And sure enough, as I changed, so did the outer circumstances of my life. And I started making money selling gourmet food. I got married to an amazing woman. She had faith in me. She let me build an addition to our house, and I built 4 houses during the boom, and I made a bunch of money, and I became fat and happy. But I was unfortunately obese at 236 pounds, and I was unfulfilled because I had quit writing. I had quit living my passion because I am a writer.
Yeah.
And one night I was at a men's self-help circle. It was down by LAX airport on the beach, and we had a campfire, and a man across the circle pointed at me and he said, "Dude, you don't know it yet, but you're already dead." And I didn't know what he meant, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. And shortly thereafter, I said to myself, well, what would I want to do if this was going to be the last year of my life? And that is my advice for people. If you are not able to make things happen right now, ask yourself the question, if this was going to be the last year of your life, what would you really want to do? Like Steve Jobs says, I call this Steve Jobs' secret weapon, George.
Yep.
He said, the most powerful tool I ever had was knowing that I was going to die soon, because it strips away all the fear and all the worry about being embarrassed or failure. And it just lets you focus on what's truly important.
That's interesting. Yet, and let me ask you this, though. Yet, being the cab driver, you could have made that something if you were happy doing that, couldn't you?
Well, yeah, I mean...
Maybe not you, but some people.
Everybody has to know what is the passion inside of you and what is going to fulfill you. For some people, their family is their fulfillment. And
right.
For them, they have to decide, well, am I being the best father or parent that I could possibly be? And a lot of people can take their level of parenting and their level of their marriage or their level of relating with anyone to a whole new level by acting as if, hey, this is the last year of my marriage because I'm going to be dead at the end of it. And if it's scary, a lot of people think it's scary. And if it is scary, you know what? That's part of the process, because fear is good. Fear makes you cherish what you have.
I like that. I like that philosophy, and it's the way to do it. The last year of your life.com, that's Clint's website. And in a moment, we'll take some phone calls with him, and maybe you want to tell us what you would do if this was the last year of your life.com. Sadly, Clint, for some people, it really may be the last year of their life. You know it?
Well, unless you're over the age of 79, it most likely is not going to be the last year of your life, because the average age of the average life expectancy in the United States is 79.06 years. So it most likely is not going to be the last year of your life. But if you want to find out about how to live this year as if it's going to be the last year of your life, I've got 4 free videos for people to find out and watch. They can get those videos for free at the website, thelastyearofyourlife.com.
Okay, well, stick with us. We're going to come back in just a moment with Clint Arthur, and we'll take your phone calls. And also, I would like to know what you would do if this happened to be the last year of your life, and live that way, especially live that way. Next hour, we begin our Who's Behind the Secret Door. It's 3 separate guests throughout the evening. I have no idea who they are. You're going to have some fun with me trying to figure out who they are when they come on. And if you need to email me, we make it very easy for you as well. That's George at coasttocoastam.com. George at coast2, got to put the T-O in there, coasttocoastam.com. We'll be back in a moment. Clint Arthur, our special guest, website linked up for you at coasttocoastam.com. Well, you can be a member of the Coast Insiders Club. It's less than 25 cents a day. What great benefits there. Downloads, podcasting, participating in monthly chats. Simply go to coasttocoastam.com and join the Coast Insiders Club. You'll see it right there at the top of the homepage. When we come back in a moment with Clint Arthur, we'll continue talking about the last year of your life and also take your phone calls right here on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Clint Arthur with us. It's the last year of your life and your phone calls as well. What do you tell people who don't believe that this could be the last year of their life, that they won't live that way, and that they put things off, that they can't go for their dream, Clint?
Well, I want to tell you that my appearance on Tonight Show was something that was predetermined 5,000 years ago by the Mayans. I mean, what are the chances, George, that I would be alive and that you would be alive on the first day of the last year of the Mayan calendar, December 24th, 2011? They created this calendar 5,000 years ago. We could have been born at any time, and here we are. And how do we know that the world is not going to be over at the end of December 21st, 2012? We don't know.
We don't know.
And if you're a person who's listening to my voice, this very well could be the last year of your life. And what are you waiting for? What are you saving those frequent flyer miles for? Do you think it's all go on forever? It's not.
All right, next up, let's go to Michael in Lincoln, California. You're on with Clint Arthur. Michael, go ahead.
Hi, George and Michael.
Yeah, hi.
I can say what I'm going to do the last year because this is the last year of my life. I'm writing a book about Vietnam. I'm writing a book about the different wisdom and things I've learned that I can pass on to my children and my grandchildren. and I'm also, every minute I get to spend with my grandchildren and my children, I just cherish it. And
good for you.
All the good that I can do for other people, I love to do it. It's a pleasure and a privilege. And I just love everybody. That's all. And I want everybody to have a really Happy New Year and a Merry Christmas and Happy Hanukkah, whatever. Just love each other. That's all.
You know, I wish more people would think that way, Clint. What a planet we'd have, huh?
It would be awesome. If everyone just loved themselves more, that's the first step. In the last year of your life, the first step to having the best year of your life is loving yourself more. And if everybody would love themselves more and love each other more, it'd be a much better planet.
I would say that people who do not enjoy their life don't care too much about themselves, do they?
That is the key to it all. Self-love is everything. And it's so easy to start loving yourself more. Here's a simple thing that you can do this week over the next 7 days to bring more self-love into your life. And this is how I stopped being a cab driver and started being successful in business. See, when I was a cab driver, my idea of a good meal was 2 Whopper Juniors and a 6-pack of Miller Lite, long neck bottles. And then I had an injury, and my chiropractor suggested that I try to heal my body with nutrition. And it turned out that what I needed to heal my body was raw oysters, clams, and scallops, according to this book that he had. And those are my favorite foods. And I said, well, if that's going to heal my body, I'll invest the money in the expensive food that is oysters, clams, and scallops because I love those. And when I started feeding myself with love, I started making money, and my whole life turned around. So for the next 7 days, if you want to try and bring more love into your life, make a list of your favorite foods. Write them down right now. Get a pen and paper. Write down your favorite foods, 7 of them, and for the next 7 days, feed yourself one of those favorite foods as a special event each day. And you will see at the end of those 7 days, you're going to love yourself a whole lot your whole life.
That's good advice. Next up, let's go to Ted in Columbia, Tennessee. Hey, Ted, thanks for calling.
How you guys doing tonight?
We're good, Ted.
I've run into a little problem with this whole 2012 end of the Mayan prediction.
Okay, tell us what.
Now, the Mayans predicted the end of their calendar according to their time scale. Now, our modern time scale is based on Jesus' birth, which would be the difference between BC and AD. Now, the Mayan, the problem is, and the fears that everyone's having is from that Bible revelations and their predictions for the end time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's the problem. According to, if you read the Bible, that Matthew 2nd chapter, it says that Herod went and killed all the infants, and Joseph took all the people, his kids, and Mary off to Egypt. And they stayed there for, a couple, 4 years. and then he received notice that Herod died. Now, if you look under the Encyclopedia of Herod's life, he lived from 73 BC to 4 BC. Now, if he died at 4 BC and the calendar starts at Jesus' birth, there's 8 years wrong. So the actual end date of this 2012 should actually have been 2004. And if you look at what happened in 2004, besides Bush being reelected, we had the tsunami, then we had Katrina, you had all those tornadoes, we had the stock market crash and everything else. Now, if you go back to that Revelation, it says it's supposed to be 7 years of nastiness at the end, and then it's be 7 years of prosperity, and then supposedly Jesus comes back. So I'm looking at 2012 should be the end of all this bad stuff that's been happening, and we go into 7 years, 8 years of good stuff, and there's really nothing to really worry about. What we should have worried about it was back, 8 years ago. Does this make sense?
That's a really interesting comment. I'm not a biblical scholar, but I am a very spiritual person, and I personally believe that these Mayan people were talking about a spiritual rebirth and a new age of spiritual awareness, where people would cherish their lives. And either way, even if it happened in 2004, if it's happening now, whatever the cause of it is, or the answer is, this is an opportunity for all of us to take this moment and say, you know what, I'm going to live my life as if I only have 1 year left to live, and allow that urgency and that ticking clock that Steve Jobs talked about to give us a new sense of personal power, to identify what's truly important, and to make 3 goals happen in our lives. Number 1, to accomplish everything on our bucket list. Number 2, to create a legacy by bringing out what's truly special within each of us. And number 3, by having more fun than we've ever had in any 1 year's time. And if that sounds like a good idea, then please come and join me at thelastyearofyourlife.com, and we can all do it together. And we can thank the Mayans for it.
But, hey, Clint, though, it doesn't mean, though, that people should be reckless in this last year of their life. Some people will take incredible chances. It might be thrilling. But, I would rather find out how deep the lake is before I jump in. So what do you recommend there?
I am not telling anybody to jump out in front of a bus or do anything stupid. I am telling you to look inside yourself and find out what you are truly passionate about, what's truly the song in your heart, and to focus on those important things that are unique to you and that make you the most special human being, and to focus on that and bring it out, bring it forth, and to dive into life with a gusto like you never had before, because you're living as if it's going to be the end.
Let's go to Mark, Toronto, Canada. Hey, Mark, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Hi, George. Hi,
hey.
Glenn. The point I'm making is I really don't understand why you're calling it living at the last year of your life.
Okay, well...
Yeah, I'll let you explain that. Go ahead, Clint.
Yeah, the Mayans say that their calendar ends on December 21st, 2012. And I'm saying if you live as if this is going to be the last year of your life, and you just go for it as if you're going to be checking out at that point in time, I advise you to have a death ritual at the end of that experience. The people who do this with me, we have a death ritual. It's intense. And the more realistic and the more you can believe that that death ritual is real, the more powerful it is for you to be reborn the next day. And the whole goal of this is to give it everything you've got for these next 12 months, and then on December 21st, 2012, we are going to have death rituals, and we're going to act as if it's going to be the end for us, and then we get reborn, and then we can face the rest of our lives and live with the legacy that we've created this year. Like the first year I did it, I built a factory for my company. I wrote a book which has gone on to be a best-selling book, What They Teach You at the Wharton Business School, and I lost weight and got healthy, and I recommitted to my marriage, so that here we are 10 years into our marriage together. And those are the legacies that I'm living with in the years beyond the first time I did this experience. And that's why you should act as if this is going to be the last year of your life, so you can start fresh when it's all over.
And it doesn't mean, Clint, obviously, that you think we only have a year to go. It means live like you do.
Yeah, live as if this is going to be the last year of your life. It's a construct. It's an idea. It's just a context for living, getting up every day and saying, okay, this is the last December 21st that I'm ever going to have, because the next time I come to December 21st, it's going to be my death day. And so I've got to make it happen right now. I've got to do the things that I really want to do. I had a book burning inside of me, George. I always wanted to write it down. What did I really learn at the best business school in the world? And because I was living as if it was the last year of my life, I wrote that book, What They Teach You at the Wharton Business School, and it became a bestseller. I had given up on writing. I had studied creative writing with a Pulitzer Prize-winning author, the greatest writer of our time, Frank McCourt, and I quit because it had put me behind the wheel of a taxi cab on New Year's Eve on December 31st, 1999, and I felt like a loser because of it. But because I was living as if it was going to be the last year of my life, I had the courage to risk failure one more time and to give it one more shot, and I wrote my book, and now I'm a best-selling author.
And that is hard to come by. Believe me, it's not easy. Not easy at all. One thing I'd advise people, even though you live like it's the last year of your life, don't deplete your bank account by the end of the 12 months, just in case, right?
I agree. However, sometimes...
But enjoy.
When you're... Sorry?
But enjoy yourself.
Definitely enjoy yourself. Like, you know, I had been coveting this Rolex watch, and I was saying to my wife, this was last year, I was saying, man, I love that Rolex watch. It's just calling my name. And she goes, well, what are you waiting for? It's the last year of your life. and today, I'm a guy who wears the Rolex watch that I've always dreamed of, and it makes me so happy every day. I enjoy my money, and I'm out there in action, spending my money and living without fear that I'm going to run out of money. I'm making it happen because I have that attitude every day that this day is the day that I need to make it happen.
And you know what? That Rolex will outlive all of us, and it'll go on and on and on. Let's go to Stephanie in Yuma, Arizona. Stephanie, you're on with Clint Arthur. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, George. Hi, Clint.
Hi.
Hey,
I'm kind of one of those skeptics, and I do believe maybe it could be the end of the world, but let's just pretend it is. Why try to sell me your video and your book and not just give them away? You're not going to be here.
I'm giving you the videos. Go to thelastyearofyourlife.com and you can watch the videos for free. Okay? There are 4 free videos there. Just click on the button at the top of the page. It says, click this button to get 4 free videos, and it'll teach you how to come alive in 2012. It'll share with you some amazing stories of triumph that people have had so that you can be inspired to also try living as if it's the last year of your life. And it can teach you how to create an inspirational plan that'll get you jumping out of bed in the morning so that when you are living the last year of your life, you are fully in action and you know where you're going and what you want to make happen and what's really important to you. And all those videos are free. So go to thelastyearofyourlife.com and get them.
West Virginia we go. It's Robert's turn on Coast to Coast. Robert, good morning.
Good morning from West by God, Virginia. How are you all?
All is well. Thank you, Robert.
Outstanding. It was something, I had plenty of time when I was in Iraq. I did 4 years there as a firefighter.
Thank you for your service.
Well, thank you for your support. And I also did 30 years with the Washington, D.C. Fire Department. And I got to go all over the country, and I got to stand right there in the cradle of civilization. I stood on the Ziggurat Temple, which was right next to Abraham's house, which was near the Tigris and the Euphrates River.
Mm-hmm.
And something happened to me where I just thought, you know, when I get out of this, I'm going to go back and I'm going to thank all the people that were good to me in my life and ask for forgiveness for all the people that I have hurt in my life and forgive all the people who have hurt me.
Yes, that is so awesome, man. Those are 2 exact weeks that we do. Forgiving yourself for the things that you've done, forgiving the people who have hurt you. When you can forgive the people who have hurt you, I call that walking through the portal to unlimited personal power.
Gosh, but that's not easy, Clint. That's the hard part, isn't it?
That is the hardest part, and you will see. I'm having a live event in Las Vegas on the 27th, 28th, and 29th of January, and one of the speakers I'm having, you probably saw him on Oprah. When he was 6 years old, his father and his stepmother kept him imprisoned in a closet in a steel cage. And I met that man a couple weeks ago, and I said, man, have you ever thought about forgiving the people who trespassed against you like that? And he goes, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, don't you find yourself muttering and saying how much you resent them while you're driving around town? He goes, yeah, I used to do that a lot. And I'm like, until you forgive the people who have committed crimes against you, you are a prisoner of those crimes. And when you want to become free and when you want to have total power, if you could forgive the people who committed the crimes against you, what could you not accomplish? That is how you get power as a person, with forgiveness.
Bill in West Hartford, Connecticut. Hey, Bill, go ahead.
Yes, hi, Clint. Hi. You mentioned passion in one's life. I've had a passion since I was a small boy, and George Norrie knows it, of the sciences, particularly astronomy, cosmology, and the world space programs, as well as skepticism of a religion. I am an atheist myself. My point is, I've had since age 14 OCD, obsessive-compulsive disorder, so I went to college, but I did not finish college, University of Hartford. My point is, so since I could not be a PhD astronomer and help the country, our country and the world through science as a PhD, what I've done instead is what I'm doing now, calling up radio talk shows to talk about logic and reason and atheism, as well as astronomy and cosmology and the space program. And I've done this as far back as 1978, when I used to call it the Late Night Radio Larry King Show between 1978 to 1990, and I've called up Coast to Coast AM between late 1995 until now.
Hey, man, if that's your passion, then amen to you. You have to identify what's important to you and focus on it and make it happen. Because, hey, man, if you were laying in the gutter tomorrow and you realized that your life was slowly fading out, you would know that you were following your true calling all the way, because you were following your passion as recently as tonight. So good for you, baby.
Clint, I've always said that sometimes I want to live as if it was my last day of my life, but maybe I need to expand it out a little bit farther, huh?
Here's a real good question for you, George. What if this was the last 15 seconds of your life? What would you do?
The last 15 seconds?
Yeah.
God, I would hate to have dead air on the radio. I don't know.
Right? Did you straighten up? Did you feel yourself straighten up your spine a little when I asked you that question?
Well, 15 seconds doesn't give me much time.
No, it doesn't. It just gives you a moment to express yourself as a human being. And every time I think about that question, I always stand up straighter.
I do a quick goodbye to everybody listening, and that would be it. Sayonara.
I would say I love my wife. Allison, I love you.
Let's take one or two more calls, time permitting. Let's go to Robin in Podo, Oklahoma. Real fast, Robin. Go ahead.
Hi, George.
Hi.
I'm sorry about your dad.
Thank you.
Sorry. He's up there with my dad. I just know it.
They're up there causing trouble, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. You know what I'd like to do? I'd like to travel all over the country and just meet people. Because
I love people.
Well, that's what you need to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need to do.
What are you waiting for? You know, you got a limited amount of time here, and people are the richness of life, the relationships. In our program, we cover two different ways. We talk about having deep connections with family and friends, and then we have a really interesting topic, which is connecting with strangers. And some of the most empowering and powerful experiences of our lives happens from connecting with strangers. One guy in the program last year, he met a man on the beach in Mexico. That stranger ended up building his dream home for him. He was a famous architect.
That is magic. That is magic. Well, sometimes in this program, you just never know what to expect, do you? And tonight, that's one of those nights. Who's behind the secret door? 3 separate guests for the rest of the evening. I have no idea who they are. You'll find out with me. Until I beg for forgiveness, then they'll have to tell me who they may be in case I don't get it. So we'll come back with guest number 1 in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Now, you know, it depends. Now, if we've had a guest on the program who's been on a lot, the chances are I just may guess who they are. But if we had a guest on who's been on once or twice and there's a long time in between, it might be tougher for me to guess who that person might be. And then you've got people like Roger Lear, and don't forget, keep saying a prayer for him so he gets better. When he comes on, and he's been on once or twice Behind the Secret Door, he changes his voice, and that's very difficult for me to find out who it is. So let's open up the secret door, first of all. There we are. So in comes our first secret guest. Hello there.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I know when you hear my voice, Truman Capote will come to mind.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, but I'm just here to tell you that's just not the case. I'm going to give you a clue. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. If you were out in the wild and you were hunting for secrets, what the Greeks call kryptos.
Okay.
What would you be hunting, and who would you be hunting with?
I have no idea. Let me talk with you for just a little bit longer here before I get down and beg for forgiveness here. Have you been a regular Coast to Coast guest? You've been on a lot?
Well, I've been on quite a few years, yes, on and off. People know me if they heard me talk normally.
Because your voice you've changed it so much, are you a male or female?
Oh, I'm definitely male, at least last time I checked.
Okay, all right. I would have assumed that, but you never know.
Now remember, George, the clue is the Greek definition of a secret.
The Greek definition of a secret.
Crypto.
Crypto. Mundo. Lauren Coleman?
Not quite, but you're getting close. You're in the jungle. It's dark. You're
Let me think.
You see a being. He's got green skin.
Oh.
You're wondering what he is. He's got scales.
All right. You're a crypto expert, right?
Pretty close. I hunt cryptos.
You're John Rhodes.
That's right.
That may be one of the best voices I have ever heard. I thought for a split second you might be Evelyn Paglini, the Good Witch.
Oh, I love the androgynous comment that you made there, though,
Oh, my God. Great job, John.
Thank you very much. When you have a lot of alone time as a kid, you learn to entertain yourself, and by, doing voices, it can be very entertaining. I've seen children do it. They're great at it.
A couple weeks ago, I watched a Showtime movie about Truman Capote. It was a movie, not a documentary. And you sound exactly the way he used to sound.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I know he was quite an artist.
He sure was. So tell me,
he was quite an actor.
What's new with John Rhodes these days in the world of cryptozoology?
Well, crypto hunting encapsulates a lot more than just the cryptozoological stuff, which you know me for, and a lot of people out there do. But I consider going out there and looking for secrets. Sometimes there's a lot of secrets out there and paperwork and old books out there on the internet that Google scanned, that they've done so many millions of books by now. They're not really editing them for great material, and there's some great material out there from like the 1800s or 19th century that's available through doing some scans, and some great research for the last 100 or 200 years that we haven't heard or seen. I was actually crypto hunting the internet one night, and I discovered a document that was from the 2006 Anthropological Great Basin meeting that occurred, in which the representative, the chairman of the Pahrump Paiute Indian tribe, gave a PowerPoint presentation. And in this PowerPoint presentation that was given, it was research that was funded by the U.S. Air Force in the Nevada Test and Training Range, which, of course, encapsulates a lot of Area 51, the Tonopah's Test Range, the Nevada Test Site, all of that area which has that secret work going on up there. And in this study, one of the slides actually talks about their belief systems that they have, the Paiute have, and they actually say that underground they still believe that there are beings with reptilian humanoid appearance living there, and that these are extraordinary beings. Now, remember, this is a report funded by the U.S. Air Force.
That's an amazing story. Might these be the ant people that the Hopis talk about, John?
Well, these are the snake people or the lizard people. The ant people, I think, are the Greys, which, of course, we now know because we see, look at an ant from a Hopi standpoint. If it's an ant on a rock, it's got a large bulbous head, large eyes. It seems to have thin extremities and arms. And then when they recognize these beings are coming up from underground and they see these like characteristics, they immediately consider them like an ant. They think of them as a part of nature, because that's what the Hopi are completely, imbued into, is all of nature. And in addition to that, you have these other beings, the snake people, that have been talked about through the desert Southwest Indian mythologies. And again, now we look at it from a modern perspective. We see these could possibly be what we perceive as the Greys and the reptilian humanoids.
John,
the Hopi word for ant is anu, and in the same language, the word naki means a good offering or a good prayer. So the combination of the anu and naki is kind of like ant friend or something like that. Now, that's kind of like the Anunnaki of Zacharias Sitchin talks about.
If you had to hone in on your expertise in cryptozoology, whether it's the search for Bigfoot, Thunderbirds, or Big Bird, what would you say would be your favorite subject?
Well, I guess what you know me best for, having worked, through the years bringing forth this information regarding reptilian humanoids, only because we're talking about a lot of colleagues of mine out there. They like to play it scientifically safe so they could be considered more serious, by people in the scientific community. So they don't like to really talk about animals that may have achieved a high state of intelligence. They don't dare go through there. A lot of cryptozoologists, they don't want to enter that realm because they want to be taken seriously. What little credibility cryptozoology truly has, I mean, there's no degrees for it or anything. So when I'm out there looking for something that has achieved intelligence, perhaps a high degree of technological advancement, even other people in my field like to separate themselves because they feel that's too much of a great leap. But it represents what most of us out there are thinking.
Reptilian humanoids, extraterrestrial, or were they always part of this planet?
I believe that this planet may have originally been theirs, and other beings that have come down have interacted with us, and so it's interaction of a reptilian humanoid planet and descendants of the giants or the elves that may have been actually military-industrial complex and others elitists from the undersurface of Mars, because whatever disaster destroyed the surface, we don't know if it happened over hundreds of years or overnight, but the only ones that would have survived, given the state of disruption on the surface, where there's hardly a sign of life, then the ones who are underground, just like our military-industrial complex is underground, and they could remain there for thousands of years and never have to worry about it if they wanted to, the survivors would need to try and find somewhere else to colonize, and of course that would be nearby Earth. So you have these groups coming down, the gods coming down and taking humans and wanting humans from the ape-like man that was here and dumbing them down and using them as cattle, so we don't know the difference between good and evil. And then you have the serpents who came up saying, hey, listen, let's disrupt this slave race thing that they've got going on for these super giant elder gods, and let's give them intelligence. And once they did that, it was a real problem because humans were awakened. And now these two god-like entities, or what we call aliens now, but back then they called them gods, they both influence society. It hasn't been just the reptoids. It's also been this giant Nordic, blonde, blue-eyed, almost Nazi-like, militaristic, corporate intelligence type of being groups that consider them super gods. And again, we look back in history and think of these wars in heavens between these gods. Obviously, they're fighting over something, and from what historical record is, they want to
fight over our belief systems. And so,
John,
therefore, we hold the power.
The devil has an uncanny resemblance to a reptilian. Is it possible that during these stories of Satan and the devil that they might have been talking about one of these reptilian humanoids?
Mm-hmm.
Is that possible?
Yes, in the earlier traditions from the Jewish literature, that was most of which was taken to comprise the Old Testament, the very beginning when they talk about Adam and Eve in the garden, the serpent they described, they actually say he had hands and legs of a man. So this isn't just a normal snake they were talking about. But through time, that was simplified by the church because it brought up too many questions, and they just wanted to reduce it down to a symbol.
Yeah.
And so therefore they say that the snake lost his legs and hands. This is also in Egyptian mythology, where they say that the serpent, Nabu, has bound the snake and cut off his hands and legs. It's almost an inference that, the ability to walk with humans on the surface and to interact with them physically, meaning use their hands and interact with them, was taken away because they were pushed into the underworld and said, you have to remain there until a certain time, until one day when we'll let you back up into the surface. And perhaps at that time, that's the point at which we're maybe looking forward to, the great, revealing of some great secret. Maybe that's it, that we share this planet.
We're talking with John Rhodes, who was our first guest behind the secret door. He's with us this hour. We're going to take your calls with him in just a moment. And had he not continued to give me clues, there's no way I would have guessed him with his great little voice that he had. His website, Reptoids.com. We'll have them all linked up for you on coasttocoastam.com, but Lex can't put it up right away for fear that I'd go to the website and figure out who it was.
Oh, great. Well, just to let your listeners know, I do actually have a link on the front page of Reptoids.com. On the bottom left of the front page, you'll see it. It actually links to the graphic in which they can see the actual presentation slide that Paiute introduced at that anthropological meeting in 2006 that described reptilian humanoids under Nevada.
David Icke has said that the power elitists on this planet are reptilian. Are we talking about one and the same here?
I think what we're talking about are groups of people who have aligned themselves with the symbol of a snake or a dragon because it's psychologically empowering, and they've seen it as such throughout history. And it also denotes power, wisdom, and all the things that the royalty like to think of themselves as having. In addition to that, it does appear as if there's been favored bloodlines through history, and those bloodlines, going back even into the British royal family and such like that, they go back some distance. Now, the blue blood commentary can refer to several things. First of all, in ancient time and modern, relatively modernist history, the blue blood people were the royals because they never went outside. Their white skin was very white. Mm-hmm. If you were somebody who worked in the field, you were constantly exposed to sun, so you was never as polished white as the people that lived in these halls that hardly ever went outside. And the veins alongside the skin were such contrast that their blood really is a green color, greenish blue color until it's actually hitting oxygen and turns red. So that looks through the skin, you get this idea that the elite are the blue bloods. But in addition to that, there is a process that takes place when an Rh-negative person and an Rh-positive person and such have children, and then there's an Rh incompatibility, the Rh factor of their blood. So some of the children are born anemic, which means that they may have been lacking oxygen in their blood systems. They're born actually blue. And this anemia is a situation that sets up for quite some time, and these are the people that they say as being the byproduct of a certain bloodline that later on continues to infiltrate the royal families. Now, are they reptilian? I would say they're as reptilian as you and I, to tell you the truth. Now, do they allow the dragon inside their soul to let them be brutal and very draconian in their thinking and non-caring, all the cold-blooded aspects, psychological aspects of a snake? Or are they different? Well, most of us would say they've encapsulated all the cold-bloodedness parts of what we would think of as a snake. Now, there are some people out there that are Rh negatives, and they are considered possibly the reptilian humanoid hybrids. That some of these people have been influential through history, including the giants that had the red hair, in which we see many of their bodies and archaeological evidence and architecture denoting some sort of an advanced knowledge by these tall, giant redheads that we've seen littering across the planet. So with that red hair, that all tends to point back to the area of Ireland and Scandinavia, because the Rh negative groups used to come mainly from there. 15% of their populations are Rh negative blood factor, whereas it's only 5% of the world. Interestingly enough, they call themselves sons of snakes and sons of dragons, the people that go back to the Tuatha Danann of the tribe of Dan, as it were, back in Ireland. And Edgar Cayce said in one of his sleeping prophecies, he said that the descendants of Atlantis, evidence of the descendants of Atlantis would show up along in the Basque regions of bordering Spain and France, and this is where there's an extremely high concentration of Rh negative blood, according to genetic scientists. In addition to that, Edgar Cayce pointed out Morocco, and most fascinating, that's another high concentration of Rh negative blood of Rh negative blood factor types that are in there. So, we're looking at all these different things, scientific points of view as well as prophetic, and we're wondering really what's happening and who's in charge.
How many of them might be on this planet? Any idea, John?
Could be small populations, I would imagine, much smaller than human populations, to be able to keep their populations down and live long periods of time to sustain some sort of a culture over hundreds, if not thousands of years. Now, maybe part of this thing about making us afraid of the reptoids and the reptilians is part of their plan, because there's so few of them that if they don't convince us they're really, really scary, then we might have the upper hand from the very beginning. So a lot of people don't consider that. So even the idea that we vilify them might be part of some sort of a mass mind control project in order to make sure that we think of them, if they arrive on Earth, a certain way. And so we have to look at modern movies that are being made and how they're presenting reptilian humanoid characters, because chances are that is a form of preconditioning. So if we see them as aggressors, then we have to wonder, if they're coming to this planet, are we being set up to believe they're aggressors even before they get here? Now, it's not impossible to think that we would be lied to even by our leadership or even by scientists, because by their own ignorance or whether by intent, we may not know.
Well, that's a good point. Stay with us, John Rhodes, our first guest behind the secret door. We'll come back in a moment and take questions for the cryptozoologist next on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, we're going to take your phone calls next with John Rhodes, cryptozoologist, when we roll along in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. John, any speaking engagements coming up for you?
No live speaking engagements, although I just got done doing a Jesse Ventura and also a Weird or What with William Shatner episode. So people will be hearing new information coming out through those avenues.
Super. Let's go to some of the phones for you. Let's go to Dallas, Texas. Keith, let's get us started here. You're up on Coast to Coast. Go ahead, Keith.
Thanks for taking my call, George. I'm thinking about the science of what's happening underneath the ground and whether or not something could be living down there. And we know based on experiments that if you go down a certain level, the pressure increases, the temperature increases, and we know for a fact from the Russian that there is mantle miles and miles beneath the surface, which is extremely hot, so nothing could be living down there. But I think there's another way that something could be going on in this field that you're looking at, and that is that maybe there's more than one world occupying this same Earth. In other words, there could be life here on the surface on this plane of existence, but perhaps on another plane of existence, the interior of the Earth is not 10,000 degrees. It's not mantle. It's actually a place where life could exist and where there's vegetation and all sorts of things. And I'm wondering what you think about that.
Actually, I think there's some merit to what you're saying. first of all, as far as the temperatures and pressures, people have to realize that, there's certain areas of the United States of the world that are geothermically active. In other words, you could sink a hole and start getting heat. The Earth, I don't believe, has layers upon layers, like an onion, of evenly distributed thermal layers of heat and magma. These things channel through the rock just like blood does through the human body, and it takes turns and twists like great rivers. And so there are areas that are cooler than others where you could actually get down quite deep. We know that through government documents, they've investigated the construction of underground bases as deep as 8,000 to 15,000 feet. So when you're talking at those depths, yes, we have the diamond mines in Africa that say it gets real hot down there, but remember, these men are using a lot of equipment, there's a lot of lights, and they haven't fully developed their underground exploration to take into consideration heat sinking, which is taking the available heat you've got in an underground space and making sure that you can vent it out. Yes, they have jet engines that actually distribute oxygen at deep levels. So the underworld is extremely habitable, more so than we're led to believe. Yeah, there are some dangerous areas as well. In regards to going down to an area inside the Earth, we've had radar returns and seismic echo returns from earthquakes at deep levels that actually say that there's some sort of a shielding down there, but we don't know if it's exactly magma, liquid magma, or something even more hard. In addition to that, you have too many beliefs of ancient societies, including the Masons, through their works in which they talk about the underworld being a place in which you can, there's works going down like hollow, they're talking about the hollow earth, in which the earth was formed like a geode. And so therefore, when you crack it open, you see this hollow space filled with these crystals, that the actual inside of our planet has some sort of a habitable space. Now, can you reach it with your physical body? Most of the research indicates that as you descend down into the Earth, there's the high potential for actually the rotation of the Earth as you get closer is spinning at a faster rate. So you're starting to lose molecules that are spinning off your body through centrifuge. And as you get deeper and deeper into the Earth, you start needing less and less food because you're actually starting to lose atomic mass. Sometimes in ancient Tibet, they talk about the great white mystics that came up from the underworld that glowed. They would stand on the mountaintops and their bodies were glowing, but they couldn't stay for very long because their glow would diminish and they would have to go back underground. So you have to wonder, are these like people that go underground and inhabit a space in which physical reality is almost, you have to wonder what's distinguishable between the physical reality, because remember, plasma is a form of energy and matter that occupies a space between physical matter and pure energy, and it is considered the fourth state of matter. So what you're saying, I think that there's a great deal of merit to that, and it certainly deserves more scientific exploration, and it should not be looked down upon by people in the scientific fields with their high egos.
Let's go to Mankato, Minnesota. Jack, you're with us on Coast to Coast. Go ahead, Jack. Thank you.
Hello, George. Hello, John. How are you this evening?
Good.
Fine, thank you.
Good. I'd like to take a moment, if I may, George. I'm sorry to hear about your father. I'm a regular listener.
Oh, thank you, Jack.
And John and George, I'd like to wish you both a very safe and happy holiday season.
Thank you very much.
I have a strange question, John. You said you just recently finished working with our ex-governor, Jesse Ventura, and William Shatner. I had mentioned when I called, the ancient Egyptians not only had human forms with dog heads, but also reptilian heads as well. And I've learned one thing as an old Trekkie, that Hollywood has an insight. And there used to be a movie called V. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you remember it or not, but it was about visitors from another planet that looked like humans that were underneath reptilian.
Right.
And I say that because William Shatner, when he did the first Star Trek movie, they were going through the movie and had introduced the first shuttlecraft called Enterprise. Well, at the time the movie came out, we didn't have a shuttlecraft called Enterprise. Mm-hmm. So there's some insight there. And from your standpoint, looking at what you say, underground people, I believe that this world is way too big, including Bigfoot and everything else, to believe that people can't live underground. But I believe reptilians and other forms of life could.
Right? You know, do you remember when Captain Kirk fought the reptilian humanoid Gorn?
Absolutely.
On the planet?
Now you're going back to TV.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
I do believe that Hollywood has had a great deal of influence, but you've got to remember a lot of Hollywood is run by certain, groups. A lot of the Jewish people control a lot of the entertainment business and such like that. So when you're seeing the films come out, are we really seeing a representation of something that's being let out through creative means, or something that's being let out through means of desensitization? I do believe that a large part of our television and film programming since the last 20 years, coming from the time of Jurassic Park and Barney the Dinosaur, if you see that there's been that long ongoing trend that's been very heavy, and I do think that there's a process of desensitization that's taking place that prepares us for something that's going to be happening.
A lot of us have thought that, John, for some time, that, Hollywood is the buffer before an event unfolds. A lot of people have thought, for example, that Steven Spielberg might have been getting inside information whenever he did Close Encounters of the Third Kind or E.T., the Extraterrestrial. They're interesting theories, aren't they?
Well, absolutely. They certainly are. Even Enemy Mine and such, where they talk about a holy book reference to the Talmud and how one person or how sometimes disasters can unite different species or bring enemies together. I think the lessons are all there because we've been conditioned through history to be afraid of a life form like this by the church. And let me tell you something, most of what the early church did was the issue of control. So if they demonize the snake, there's an issue they have with the snake, and it may not be for the normal person, because religions lose their power when they lose their belief, their congregation's belief system. And when you are looking at something like a reptilian humanoid appearance, you have to be wondering to yourself also, what's the Catholic Church going to say? We know they've built the observatories. We know they've said that they can convert, even aliens to different forms of Catholicism if the aliens should want to go down that path. But I would say that it's going to be a very interesting question when they start facing something that is akin to what we pulled out of that craft in Roswell. Remember, it was described as having reptilian skin, beaded skin like a lizard, and also the small suction cups on its fingertips, which are, like I've said before on your show, a signature of an arboreal or tree lizard. When you put those facts together with one of the most famous UFO cases in American or global history, we're certainly looking for something like that to return and take center stage.
Okay, next up, let's go to Lewis in Buffalo, New York. Hey, Lewis, thanks for calling. Lewis, you with us? Nope, no Lewis in Buffalo, but let's go to Tess driving around in California. Hi, Tess.
Hi.
Hey, welcome to the show.
Hi, Tess.
Well, thank you for having me, George, and condolences because of your father. And
Okay,
hi, John.
Hello, Tess.
I wanted to ask, I'm actually from Australia, so if you don't understand what I'm saying, just ask me to repeat the question. I wanted to know your take on what you thought about Jesus and God and religion into your theory of these snake people, dragons.
All right, any tie in there?
That's an interesting question. It's a loaded question, of course, but I'm willing to tackle it.
Go for it.
I think that we should look back at it and recognize that some people say, that Jesus was not a real man, and others say that he was a fictional character based on the solar worship evolving out of Egyptian and Phoenician areas. And I would say most likely he was both. He was a man that recognized the importance of these ancient traditions and also recognized that in order to move a religious movement forward, there had to be the return of this son of God in order to make the solar sacrifice in which he puts himself out and sacrifices himself for everyone around him and to uplift people. And at that time in history, he may have taken it upon himself to fulfill that. Now, we know that, obviously we're talking about a very learned man. Back in those days, he was more of a Gnostic than he was what we would consider a traditional Christian of today, which means that the serpent played a huge impression upon the people who we know as the Essenes, who later evolved into the Gnostics. And that area of our Western religion was crushed out by the Roman Catholic Church. They wanted nothing to do with it. The eagle, the angel man, had defeated the snake man. And so therefore the snake man was vilified. My take on that is that I believe that there is some form of a consciousness, perhaps, or some beings that are going to be returning to our planet, and maybe not in 2012, December 21st, 2012, which I'm happy to say thank you very much for inviting me on at the 11th hour at the eve of the one-year anniversary of the countdown to December 21st, 2012, George. I wanted to remember to thank you for that. It's an honorable position.
Well, you can thank Tommy, too. He's Mr. Surprise here.
Oh, absolutely. Tommy's always a surprise. But what we may be looking for is some of our Western traditions also say that what we're expecting is actually going to happen when when we're not expecting it. It's going to happen earlier or later, most likely earlier. It's going to take us by surprise. Now, I would say we should start looking forward to June 5th, 6th of this year, 2012, coming up, which is only 167 days away, because that's when Venus transits the sun. In other words, it crosses the path from the left to the right on the upper portion of the visible sun. And it does this very few times. It happens in pairs, and it is going to be happening again in June 5th, 6th, 2012. And now, when you consider what the symbol of Venus is the snake, the carrier of light, the Mother Mary, Jesus was also known as the bright early morning star. We look at that symbolism and merge it with what the ancients used to think of as the sun, like the father, and then the mother, which is the Venus female green symbol, and the earth. And I think that this is going to play a really large part in everything that's going on, more so even than other dates that we have in mind. You have to remember that the Mayans, their whole world was wrapped around Venus and the cycles of 13. And we are coming up to this point where Venus transits the Earth, where, if you can imagine it from a Mayan's point of view, whoever was there in 1991, July 11th of 1991, operating the small disc craft over the crowds while everybody watched the solar eclipse of 1991, they are most likely going to be over the skies of Mexico City, I have no doubt, this coming June 5th, 6th of 2012. So we have to look forward to that date.
Very good. Let's go to Chuck in Raleigh, North Carolina. Hey, Chuck, welcome to the program.
Hey, George, how you doing?
Okay, Chuck. Sure thing. Go ahead.
Last time I talked to you was on your birthday a couple of days ago. I was driving my truck through Dallas, and tonight I'm sitting in Raleigh.
You're everywhere.
Yes, I'm everywhere. Actually, I wanted to ask John about the Piasa bird, and I was wondering if maybe he thought it was a dragon. I mean, we see dragons all over the place in Europe and Asia, and my family's from around, the St. Louis area, and I've always been interested in the Piasa bird, and I just kind of wanted to know what he thought about it.
Do you know that story? It's the bird that the Native Americans trapped and captured, and it was supposed to be one of these thunderbirds, John.
The Piasa bird, right. We wonder if it could have been some form of or descendant of the pterodactyls, or the large birds that, with the bat-like wings. We also know that when we've heard stories, Native American myths, and match those up with things that we hear like on our East Coast with the Mothman prophecies, this is a flying being as well. And from a great distance, if you have nothing to reference it to, you might think it's also a bird. I do believe that there are sometimes nature produces some remarkable abstracts to the norm. In other words, we sometimes have giant humans that are towering above everybody else. And it could be that there are, before they died out or went to extinction, remnants of a form of large birds that were revered by the Indians in the desert Southwest, and that they may have actually had sightings of them. Now, why are we not finding their fossils or anything like that? Well, remember, fossils only represent a very small portion of what is ever left over on the surface after so much of a mass of that life has disappeared and gone. So it's really a crap toss trying to even find the bones. But there is something to it. We also know that winged beings in the night have come down and swooped upon people. I keep referring back to that, or thinking back to that movie about in the desert there were reptilian humanoids living underground. And it was a very famous movie out of the 1950s. It kind of skips my mind right now, but The Gargoyles, that's right. And it was a great film, but, we don't know if maybe some cavern systems actually have winged humanoid beings living in them. We know that we've seen the flying witches or flying beings also down in Mexico, but, we're not hearing the Thunderbirds in Mexico, but we hear more of a traditional type of a witch description, which makes me wonder, is it some sort of a UAV that's disguised itself so people just report a flying witch instead of a flying drone? Or are we really dealing with beings that are out there flying around and that have actually been the basis of a lot of these traditional myths? And we're not exactly sure. But I think, again, that's an area in which somebody I wish would study as hard as, some of us have studied other areas of cryptozoology because it's deserved.
John, will we ever find Bigfoot?
Oh, I think we will. I think that we're going to find that Bigfoot and reptilian humanoids are occupying remote areas of the planet and are encountered on occasion. And they're just a little bit more wild than others of their same kind, probably because they live in such remoteness and maybe near the surface of the Earth. So they're a little bit more primitive as opposed to the more conscious ones or intelligent ones, I would say. And I use that description carefully because intelligence is a matter of frame of reference. So, I do believe we're going to see it. I also think that we're going to see that some of these beings are a cross between mammal and reptile because we have to remember we thought of dinosaurs as reptiles, but we know now that birds are evolved dinosaurs, but we think of them as warm-blooded. So somewhere along the line, cold-blooded reptiles became warm-blooded mammals, birds, what we think of as birds. So that really that idea of saying, well, it's got to be a mammal Bigfoot or a reptilian reptoid, it's going to somewhere along the line, I think, blur because we're going to see something come up that maybe has a mixture of both primitive scale structure and hair follicles.
All right, my friend John Rhodes, thank you so much for being on the program. John's website is linked up at coasttocoastam.com. Up next, another person behind the secret door. Let's see if I can guess who it is. We'll be right back on Coast to Coast AM. Don't touch your dial. Okay, in a moment, we're going to go behind the secret door number 2 to find out who our second guest is tonight, right here on Coast to Coast AM. Well, I finally got John Rhodes right, but it would have taken a while, and had he not given me the clues, I was going to have to give up. But let's open up secret door number 2. Come on in. Who's there? Hi there.
Hello, George.
Hello.
We have all kinds of amazing systems and electronic gadgets, and they're all hooked up to the Internet now, aren't they?
I know this voice, Lauren Weinstein.
Oh, I can't even do the rest here.
The minute I heard Internet, I knew it was you. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm sorry about the voice. It's chilly here behind.
The voice was good. The voice was good, except, I had you on just a few days ago, right, as we were talking about some things, and you were in my mind.
You know what I should have done? I should have said something about plumbing.
That's right. That would have
then you wouldn't have, then you would have thought I was someone else, and I could have, done the rest of the spiel here. So.
That's true. Well, but I would have asked you for clues, and you would have had to give up. This is kind of fun, isn't it?
This is very fun, and happy early holidays here.
You too, by the way. We do this twice a year, secret door programs, and, I've been stumped before, and, sometimes the guest has not told me who they were, and so I had to flutter around until I was able to find out who they were. But this is fun. What's going on with you now?
Well, things kind of slow down this time of the year. I think that's probably a good thing. It gives everyone a chance to kind of think back over the year and what issues there are that we've dealt with and what's coming up for next year, and kind of prepare ourselves for the battles yet to come.
My daughter sent me a little email and said, Papa, let me give you a call in about an hour, and she did, and she said, this is what our kids want, her kids, my grandchildren, want for Christmas, and she laid out all these electronic gadgets that these little kids, and they're 10 and 9, they're little ones, but how did they get into this stuff so early?
Yeah, I had Lincoln logs.
I had an erector set.
A 7.5 erector set for me. Yeah, right. It's and now it's not just a matter of having electronic gadgets for kids. They have to be internet connected and wireless. So
and GPS works and all this stuff. It is amazing what social networking has done.
Yeah, for good and for not so good, but that's the challenge is to steer this toward the good and toward the learning experiences and the educational experiences, and to help kids learn how to turn